I bought 21 cans of tuna ranging from a single dollar all the way up to $21 per can in order to figure out the answer to a question that has been bugging me for years. What can of tuna should I be buying at the store? Like, can you actually taste a difference between these? And in short, I found out there are 4 key variables that affect the flavor of a can of tuna that everyone needs to understand when perusing the grocery store aisle. First is the tuna species, such as albacore versus skipjack versus yellowfin. Secondly is the texture, such as solid versus chunk or fillets versus belly. Third is the packing liquid, such as water versus oil packed. And lastly are added ingredients, such as salt, vegetable broth, spices, and other flavorings. And I did a bunch of taste tests between all of these, and along the way we'll answer plenty of questions such as how is tuna fished and canned for in the first place, what cans are best eaten alone as a snack, or what type of canned tuna is the best for a tuna salad sandwich. This is the texture and flavor of like classic deli tuna salad. So to begin, let's get into variable number 1, tuna species. Now with this video, I hope to save you from spending well over $100 on canned tuna like I did, but if you're looking to save more, let me introduce you to today's sponsor, Rocket Money. One of the most annoying things these days is keeping track of all of our various subscriptions. We've got the streaming, the music, meal delivery, fitness services, and then I have a lot of other subscriptions too that I'm using on the business side on a separate credit card, and it's so easy for me to lose track of them all. But with Rocket Money, I can link all of these accounts and see all of my recurring subscriptions in one place. And as soon as I set this up, I realized I've been paying for legal software we haven't used in 3 months, so I canceled that. Then on the personal side, I was like, okay, I'm gonna cut down to 1 streaming service at a time, watch through everything on that streaming service, cancel it, then start another one. That's the low-hanging fruit, but Rocket Money can also help you lower your bills, set budgets, and set up smart savings so you can make sure you're spending money on the things you want to be spending them on. So if you're at the grocery store and see a $20 can of tuna, you can say, hey, I budgeted for this. So to take control of your finances today, go to rocketmoney.com/Ethan to get started for free. But now, let's talk tuna. Globally, there are 15 species of tuna, however, there are 5 main ones that are commercially fished for. These are bluefin tuna, big eye, yellowfin, albacore, and skipjack tuna. And across these 5 species, there are 23 stocks that are tracked by the International Seafood Sustainability Foundation around the world in the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans. Some of these tuna species are more popular for canned tuna, while others are mainly used for steaks like ahi or eaten raw as sushi and sashimi. Skipjack is mostly used for canned tuna. And if you buy a can where it says tuna generically on the ingredient label, it's almost assuredly the skipjack species. Skipjack is also the fish of choice used to make katsuoboshi, which is one of the 2 key ingredients for making dashi in Japanese cuisine. Next, albacore is probably the second most common canned tuna option you'll see, but can be used for fresh tuna steaks as well. Yellowfin are more commonly used for steaks and sushi, but I did find a few more expensive cans using yellowfin tuna. Big eye are pretty much only used for steaks, sashimi, and sushi, and in the 21 cans that I purchased, 8 were albacore, 9 were skipjack, 3 were yellowfin, and 1 was tongal, which is probably a lesser commercially fished for species that the ISSF doesn't track. And there are 2 big questions that I wanted to find an answer for. First, how are these species of tuna fished for, and are certain fishing methods better for dolphins? And secondly, can you actually taste a difference between different species of canned tuna? So for question number 2, I'm gonna set up a little tuna tasting flight with some skipjack, tongal, and albacore tuna, all just packed in plain water at this point. I'm gonna wait to try the yellowfin varieties because these are all packed in oil that I happen to find, so it really wouldn't be a fair comparison at this stage until we talk about variable number 3, the packing liquid. So while I set this up, let's learn how tuna are fished for, because I was surprised to find out that unlike salmon, which more and more of today is becoming farmed, 99% of tuna is still wild caught. Tuna are incredible creatures and can be found in almost every ocean around the globe, as they are a larger predator of the open ocean. The Atlantic bluefin tuna, for example, have been caught at up to 1,500 pounds and can swim constantly at speeds of up to 40 miles per hour. However, the more common canned tuna species of albacore and skipjack are much smaller, typically sizing at 80 and 40 pounds respectively. And like I mentioned, most tuna is wild caught on the open ocean because it's really not feasible to farm them. So when you see wild caught on a can of tuna, it doesn't really tell you anything. And in general, there are 4 main fishing methods used to catch tuna. Some of them are better for tuna and other sea creatures. First are drifting long lines. This setup has a main line supported by floats and then evenly spaced branch lines with baited hooks on them, where they can be up to 50 miles long and have thousands of hooks across the setup. Secondly are floating object purse seines. This method surrounds the tuna with a large wall of netting that's closed like a drawstring purse in order to capture them. And a natural or artificial floating object called a fish aggregating device, or FAD, lures the tuna and many other sea species to an area, making them easier to catch in this drawstring setup. Next, there are unassociated purse seines. So this is the exact same setup with that large wall of netting that's closed like a drawstring purse, but those FADs are not used. And the goal here is to avoid luring other sea creatures that could get caught in the nets. And lastly, we have trolling lines or hand lines and hand-operated pole and line caught tuna. And in this case, the tuna are caught with 1 or more fishing lines with baited hooks. And these fishing methods are typically described as troll caught, pole and line caught, and you'll see these on the canned tuna labels you buy at the store. And seafoodwatch.org recommends looking for cans with terms that denote the last 2 methods, as these are less likely to catch and harm other sea creatures. And in the past, Dolphin Safe was pretty much the only label you'd see on a can of tuna, but nowadays that's kind of the bare minimum. Of the 21 cans I purchased, all of them had that Dolphin Safe label. 6 of them called out pole and line caught, and then 8 of them had the MSC certified sustainable stamp. And on average, these cans tend to cost an extra $1 or $2. And I highly recommend reading through this great article by National Geographic if you want to learn more about the specifics of these different fishing methods. And one last question I had, since tuna are wild caught, are they at threat of becoming endangered due to overfishing? Well, using the ISSF tuna stock tool, of the 5 species, albacore and skipjack stocks are generally healthy, and it's the yellowfin, big eye, and bluefin stocks that have some issues with overfishing and need improvements. So whether you are buying skipjack or albacore, canned tuna is a great shelf-stable, high-protein source that we need to figure out which one tastes the best. So for consumption purposes, tuna meat is interesting in a couple of ways. When it's raw and depending on the species, the meat can have a reddish hue all the way to a deep red color thanks to a higher myoglobin content, which is the oxygen storing molecule that gives all red meat its color. And in the larger species of tunas used for steaks and sushis like the yellowfin, big eye, and bluefin, they do have these more distinct cuts with different protein and fat compositions, just like you'd see in a cow or pig. And in this chart, you can see the different sections used for sushi cuts such as sakami, sanaka, or that tuna belly. However, canned tuna is steamed and cooked well done, meaning it's kind of like a sous vide steak with not much flavorful Maillard reaction on the outside. However, when I opened up these cans of skipjack, tongal, and albacore tuna side by side, they are different shades of color, likely due to some differences in the protein, fats, and myoglobin content. And some people will say that albacore is kind of like the chicken breast, while skipjack is more like a chicken thigh with a potentially stronger aroma. But is that actually true? So I've got my 3 different tuna species. I drain them off because I don't want the liquid to kind of influence the taste and textures that I'm getting. So let's blindfold up and see if there are some noticeable differences here. And I'm going to try to focus on taste and aroma here because we're going to continue to talk about texture a little bit later. It doesn't have a super strong taste or aroma. Like, it's tuna for sure, but not super fishy. In terms of taste and aroma, 1 and 2 very similar. Slightly bigger chunks in number 2. Wow, that's interesting. So no question here, number 3 definitely like the most fishy aroma to it. 1 and 2 were quite mild and very, very similar to each other. So this is a really interesting test to do side by side. It's got my wheels turning a little bit. The albacore is definitely very, very mild tasting compared to that skipjack. So if someone doesn't like kind of the fishiness of tuna, maybe it's because they primarily only had skipjack tuna compared to something like albacore, which really is quite mild. And then the tongal is definitely closer to the albacore than it is the skipjack, at least in my opinion. Both are really good. I think what's going to be interesting here to see is like, does this kind of extra fishy aroma come through when we use it for a tuna salad where you're adding, mayo and a bunch of other ingredients? And then also, how do these flavors change when they're packed in things like oil And again, we've got a couple of different textures we've got to try for the rest of this video, but very interesting taste test for number 1. Okay, so variable number 1. Does the tuna species matter? I would say absolutely. It's very easy to tell a difference in the aroma here. However, now let's look at the rest of the tuna canning process and our 3 remaining variables, because before making this video, I didn't even know it was possible that you could buy tuna belly in canned form. After the particular tuna species is caught with one of those 4 fishing methods we talked about, from a high level, here's how it goes from the ocean to a tin on the supermarket shelf. Cryogenic freezing is a common practice where fishing boats for all kinds of seafood have chambers that freeze the day's harvest at an accelerated rate by circulating extremely cold air at high speeds. The frozen tuna is then brought to the canning plants, and operations can source their tuna from many different fishing boats or areas of the world, but it depends entirely on the brand. And during this stage, the tuna are grouped according to their size and weight for uniformity in thawing and pre-cooking. Next, the frozen tuna are removed from the freezer and steam baked for a prescribed time and temperature depending on the size of the fish. And this process removes any excess oils and prepares the tuna for the easy removal of the skin and bones. Cooked tuna is then broken down, where the meat is separated from the carcass and sorted for different uses and packed into cans, jars, or packages. And usually the lighter loin meat is what ends up being used for canned tuna. However, as I found out, there are a wide range of cuts from fillets to broken down chunk or large solid hunks, and this brings us to variable number 2, texture. In all the cans I purchased, there were 6 different textures on the can: chunk light, solid light, chunk white, solid white, fillets, and belly. And when it comes to texture, there's one important item to keep in mind when you're buying tuna, and that is the texture of the tuna important for what you are making? So to help answer that question, I gave them all a try, including that $21 can of tuna belly. So we can clearly see some differences in texture here, but I'm just gonna taste through them and kind of give you some of my thoughts and opinions on maybe what textures might be good for what purposes. So both of the chunk light and chunk white, you can kind of see just like broken up little pieces in there. And then as far as like the flavor and aroma goes, again, that's that difference between Skipjack and Albacore. Albacore just much more mild. And then when you move on to the solid varieties of solid Skipjack, solid Albacore, you can see we get these like nice, solid, probably cut chunks, and then you can actually like flake off these whole pieces. And I think what's interesting to note here is like aesthetically, solid white Albacore looks really good, but if I was using this for a tuna salad, I would probably break up all of these pieces anyway. So in that case, it would make sense, but if you did want to maybe use these over the top of a salad and like have these nice flakes, solid Albacore or solid Skipjack is probably the way you want to go. Let's give this fillet a shot. It definitely feels a little bit more tender to me compared to the solid Albacore. And again, with the fillets, I would say similar to the Albacore, like it's kind of nice to have these bigger chunks, but if you're using it in like a tuna salad and breaking up everything anyway, doesn't really matter. But if using for, I don't know, some kind of pasta or like a salad situation, that's like a pretty useful texture to have. Lastly, I'm gonna try tuna belly in canned form for a first time. See, we got these nice big pieces. Definitely more tender. However, at like 20 bucks for this single can, that's kind of ridiculous. So in terms of eating them alone here, I definitely think the fillet and the belly are probably the best to eat alone. However, they are also the only tuna of these 6 that are packed in oil. I think if we added some oil to this kind of Albacore, it would be right up there with them. You get these nice big chunks, and that's exactly why we need to talk about variables number 3 and 4 and do some testing where we add our own oil compared to tuna that has been canned in oil. So does tuna texture matter? Well, it kind of depends on what you are making. Personally, I like to break up my tuna salad, but I'm going to make a chunky tuna salad to test after we talk about variables 3 and 4. So after the cooked and cleaned tuna with the various textured is portioned and added to the cans, jars, or packaged, it is then time for filling and sealing. And this brings us to our final 2 variables. Variable 3 is the packing liquid, and variable 4 are added flavorings. Canned tuna is going to be packed in water or oil, and a lot of times this will be olive oil, but it could be a standard vegetable oil too. You'll need to check the ingredients. Then additionally, added flavorings includes things like salt, vegetable broth, and spices or flavorings such as oregano, or this package is mango habanero. And you may be wondering, does oil-packed tuna taste better than water-packed, or what is the best type of flavored tuna? And those are kind of the wrong questions to ask. Instead, here's how I look at it. So when it comes to oil versus water-packed tuna, I view them as just fundamentally different products. If you want something more convenient that you can kind of eat straight from the can, it's probably gonna taste pretty good, then yeah, I would definitely look into an oil-packed tuna variety. You know, there's a reason why we tend to add a bunch of mayo and stuff to water-packed tuna. However, I would point out two caveats. First, this is not gonna be packed with super high quality oil. You could easily add your own oil to something like a Skipjack or Albacore. And secondly, you can also add your own spices and really doctor up plain tuna just as you want. And personally, after trying like a $21 can of tuna belly, no way would I ever buy this again. Like, it's good, yeah, but no way worth that. Instead, you know, for example, you could get a can of Albacore tuna, add some high quality olive oil, a couple other spices, and probably make it taste pretty damn close to one of these more expensive oil pack varieties, but that's ultimately gonna be up to you. Okay, so now that we understand the 4 variables, there are just 3 things left to do in this video. First, I want to do some tuna salad testing with an Albacore versus Skipjack, and then a smoked tuna versus an oil-packed tuna. Secondly, do you need to worry about mercury in your canned tuna? And lastly, if I could buy a single can, which one would I recommend? For tuna testing, I wanted to see if I could still taste the difference between Skipjack and Albacore tuna after I add a bunch of mayo and spices and make a little tuna salad and pop it on a roll for a sandwich test. Let's get into this. Really nice balance in that one, pretty mild tasting. These are 100% different. Texture right away actually does come through. This is the texture and flavor of like classic deli tuna salad. Really solid. I'm gonna guess 1 and 3 are the same, and then 2 is different. Yep. This is a really interesting test because I like the different tuna salads for different reasons. So I think if you're trying to replicate like a deli tuna salad, they are 100% using Skipjack tuna. That's exactly what this reminds me of. A little bit more of that stronger fish aroma. The spices and stuff that I added kind of blend more to the background. And on the flip side, that's what's really nice about the Albacore actually, is the dill, the pepper comes a lot more through. So I think if I was going for like a more experimental, trying out some different spices and stuff that I wanted to come through, I'd probably use Albacore. But if I'm trying to replicate something closer to like a classic, you know, deli style tuna, I think Skipjack is the way to go. A really fascinating test. Now for my second test, I just wanted to have some fun with tuna creations. I made a harissa tuna salad with a can of smoked tuna and a little spritz of lemon. Then I also made a chunky version with the tuna fillets in oregano with a little vinaigrette and shallot on top of that. Let's see how these tuna creations taste. These fillets are nice. You get that nice like meatier bite of tuna, and then add a little shallot, a little black pepper in there. Great little quick snack. See how this smoked harissa tuna salad tastes like. That's good. That's definitely a winner for me right there. That smoked tuna is really nice, and then mix it with a little bit of mayo, the harissa in there, a little lemon juice for that kick, a little dill on top. That's a really good snack too. So it feels like Mercury always comes up when people talk about canned tuna, but I was surprised to learn 2 things. First, all fish and seafood have mercury in them that we consume. And secondly, the fresh tuna species of big eye bluefin and yellowfin, which we talked about earlier are commonly used for steaks and sushi, actually have more mercury in them on a parts per million basis than the canned varieties of Albacore and Skipjack. And actually, Skipjack is the lowest. Mercury is a naturally occurring metal in the environment and is present in all species of fish. And when a small fish gets eaten by a bigger fish, the amount of mercury actually increases through a process called biomagnification. This means that all seafood at the top of the food chain are higher in mercury, and you can see this chart breaks it down. Too much mercury in your body can cause health issues if you are eating seafood with a high frequency, especially infants and those who are pregnant. So how much is too much? Well, it depends. And I'll link this chart below with their recommendations for children and those who are pregnant, where they say 2 to 3 servings of light skipjack tuna per week, however, only 1 to 2 servings of albacore. Which may make you wonder, well, if I'm not a child or pregnant, how much canned tuna or other seafood can I be eating? And there's not really a perfect recommendation out there that I can find. If anyone has one, I'll definitely link it below. One article mentioned it could be as much as 25 cans of skipjack per week. There's another recommendation out there that's like 0.1 micrograms per kilogram of body weight, and then you need to do a calculation based off that. And as always with this stuff, we need to take in the totality of our diet and really look at it from that perspective. Think about how much tuna and other seafood you are eating on a day-to-day basis, and then that can kind of help guide you. Again, I'll leave all those links down below. Now, to round out this video, if I could only pick one can to keep stored in my pantry, which one would I pick? And for me, I think it's Albacore tuna, and there's really just one reason why, and that is it gives me the most flexibility. The mild flavor means it pairs well with any spices or fats and oils I add, and additionally, I can keep it in these big textured chunks. That being said, I think the real answer, for me at least, is I'll probably be stocking multiple ones of these. The skipjack tuna for me totally replicates like that classic deli-style tuna, so if that's the vibe I'm going for, I'm kind of going to go with skipjack in that case, but I know a lot of people don't like that style of tuna salad. And then secondly, I really like some of those flavored options. The smoked tuna in the harissa tuna salad was really good. And then just having like a can in oil is great to just have as a snack option if you don't happen to have, mayo and you don't want to actually make a tuna salad. So for me personally, I think I'm going to probably keep multiple, and now I know which ones are best for which use cases. But I'd really like to hear from you. Based off everything that we've learned in this video, the 4 variables, what can of tuna are you going to try or going to buy for yourself? But anyway, that will wrap it up for me in this one. I will catch you all in the next one. Peace, y'all.